Yes. So in the interest of time management, I pre-recorded my presentation, and hopefully there will be less ums and pauses. So without further ado.
I am a general contractor who is bidding on a large-scale home. Let's start with the problem statement. I am a general contractor who is bidding on a large-scale home renovation, and I just received the final iteration from an architect. And it has a lot of information, all the information that I would possibly need to accurately do takeoff and estimation on my project. What do we mean by takeoff and estimation? I have to go through this document and annotate all the different scopes of work, whether it's demolishing a wall or installing plumbing, wiring, HVAC, everything. I have to create an accurate and detailed list of all the scopes of work, along with the materials required and the labor hours. I need to know how much to bid on the project for the client. Now, it would be great if I could just throw this whole PDF into ChatGPT and ask it to generate a list or CSV of detailed scopes of work with all the time and material estimates. But I'm sure it will come as no surprise that GPT is not up to this task, and that's putting it nicely. Enter project codename Timbergen, which is guided by a philosophy of context engineering. In other words, we want the AI to be able to understand this complex document in the same way that a professional estimator or general contractor would. And they're representing the information from this document in the form of entities and connections. For example, an entity is something like a symbol. This symbol is a circle 2. Now this symbol is defined, it has some meaning, and it's defined somewhere, which in this case happens to be right here. In other cases, there might be a symbol such as this W2A diamond. Now, this is not defined anywhere on this sheet, but it is defined in something called the schedule. Now, if we look here at W2A, it will show us that this represents a wall, and that these are all the materials required for this wall. So this diagram shows an early version of our knowledge graph data model, which contains all the entities that we might care about, starting at a high level with the sheet or the page. So if we consider takeoff and estimation to be a black box, there is an input of an architectural document, and there's an output of a list of scopes of work, right? And we want to reverse engineer this black box. If we can concretely define all the symbols, all the notes, all the assemblies, all the legends, all the drawings, and what they represent in the physical space, then we could ask something like an LLM, what are all the plumbing scopes of work that I have to do on the first floor? That can turn into a GraphRag type query, right? The output that the LLM can give will be always grounded in the actual document, not just the sheet, but even the specific coordinates on each sheet. And every scope will be justified by some combination of visual context as well as semantic context in the form of the words. Let's get into a quick demo of how Timbergen works. So we start with our architectural document. And here we can navigate through all the sheets. You can see here on the bottom that we're doing some processing and that we will be doing OCR. The guiding principle of this application is that there are no shortcuts. I've done multiple iterations of this project in the past, referencing the specific workflow of a general contractor, but I'd have to go to the drawing board several times. So we can define here various entities. For example, we might have this list of abbreviations. We might consider this a node. We can enrich this node on our knowledge graph. For example, this is a glossary. Going here, we might have several drawings that we want to pay attention to later. The very base case is that the user will manually build out the entire knowledge graph by hand. But of course, there are lots of areas that are ripe for automation. One simple example would be OCR. If we click the OCR tab here, the text is auto-detected. And we can use that to do something like this, where we can highlight all the aspects of the text. We can accept and merge these OCR blocks, and we can promote them to notes. For example, we might say that this is a to-do. So here we might define a schedule, and we might call this the door schedule. Similarly, we might have here, and we'll call this drawing, or a series of drawings, door components. In this way, we are beginning to populate or hydrate our knowledge graph with actual instances of the different nodes. Although this is a manual process, it is necessary to create an application that has the flexibility. There's a lot of variation in how every user might interact with such a document. Timbergen application has to be flexible and have a seamless UI and UX to allow the users to externalize their internal mental model or knowledge graph into something that is in data, into something that an LLM can reason about and can query and can provide answers to. Of course, this is not a context engineering hackathon, it's an AI hackathon. Let's look briefly at an example of how AI technologies can later be integrated once we have this foundation of a flexible and widely applicable knowledge graph. This research here, ARCAD 400K, is research that came out of China and was published last March. This shows a huge open data set for training vision models to recognize symbols and common motifs in architectural drawings. This is a perfect use case for, say, fine-tuning an object detection model, such as YOLO. This type of technology can be used to enhance the takeoff and estimation Copilot that I'm starting to build in Timbergen.
Thank you, everyone. So everything in the video is live. I promise. Here, I think this is. I just recorded this video, so feel free to ask any questions or see if you want any more details about how the app works or anything. Yes, please.
This famous problem of getting LLMs to understand architectural drawings. Are the models now reasoning about them pretty well?
I found it through my experimentation that if you're really zoomed in, like maybe like on a single room, you can get some decent inference by the LLM. But something that's any more complicated than that, and good luck. Yeah.
Thank you.
So my question is like, rather than doing the OCR on this kind of file, who makes this file in software? Like, why don't we take that file directly and then use that file?
Yeah, that's a great question. Getting the source CAD files. That's a really good question. I mean, one answer to that is that I don't have access to as many architects. And then the other answer to that question is that my customer is the general contractor. And the general contractor, for all intents and purposes, just receives the PDF. And so I'm trying to figure out how to do automation from that general contractor. But yeah, there's a lot deep. It goes a lot deeper than that, but that is a very good question. It's something that I asked a while ago. Yes.
Yes, let's say, I've looked in this space before. Actually, super interesting approach at doing this. I think not going too far down the fully automated path is actually a really good idea here, because I know these people spend tons and tons of time trying to get estimates. Also interesting to note that, I didn't know this, but there's different levels of estimation. So there's kind of the high level swag of like, it's going to be about this much all the way down into every single nail at a certain cost. So I think, being able to think about those categories and start up high and then kind of work down the stack, really interesting area to go after. So
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Thank you. Yeah. Yes. Please, Angie. Yeah.
Why did you choose this problem?
I chose this problem because a good friend of mine, who's actually in the audience today, is a general contractor, and I spent some time with him, peering over his shoulder and trying to understand like how he does his work. And this was identified. This takeoff and estimation process was identified as a major pain point. And I think throughout the industry, it's one of the most time-intensive and expensive overhead in any kind of construction estimation, GC work.